Dylan here, producer of the Ecommerce Alley podcast. Now, this is a very special episode of the Ecommerce Alley podcast because it is our 100th episode. And not only that, it's also the start of season 3. Somehow they both ended up on the same day. So that's super cool. Now, we have been making this podcast for 2 years now. And before we get into this episode, I just want to say we are so thankful for all of you. Whether you have been listening for a month or all 2 years, I just want to say thank you to you. Now, this is going to be a super fan episode. It's going to be long, but I promise it's worth it, so stick around. I'm going to be interviewing Josh in this episode, and we're going to walk through his entrepreneurial journey. We're going to talk about everything from him selling porn magazines in school, you'll have to just listen to figure out what that is, to having 5 businesses running simultaneously, if you can actually call it running. I'll leave that up to you. And talking about what has gotten us here, including Josh's rock bottom and his epiphany to start the Ecommerce Alley. Then at the end, we're gonna dive into the plans that Josh has for the future of the Ecommerce Alley. This is going to be a long one, but if you are a fan of the Ecommerce Alley and have been following us for any length of time, I truly invite you to buckle down and enjoy this episode. I would also advise you watch or listen to this episode in parts if you can't do it all in one setting. You're not gonna wanna miss this whole episode.
It's crazy that we're in 100 episodes.
I almost didn't think this day would come. I'm
Halfway
amazed.
through, we're like dying of how much work this is.
I'm amazed that we made it this far. And now it's gotten like so much easier because we have such a good flow. And now it's like, let's get to 1,000, you know?
It's pretty crazy. And like with what we do, I tell everybody, you got to get your reps in, you got to get your reps in, and we teach people Facebook advertising and marketing stuff. So it's like, this podcast is a living, breathing example of that.
Yeah.
Because you got to push through and it freaking sucks. And when you're getting like 90 downloads in the first month and you spend
whole month,
and you spent freaking 6 hours filming and many more hours scripting and editing and
not to mention building the studio and
all that
finding
work,
the person to do it. And
you hear of all these podcasts, they started it and it like blew them off the map, you know, and then here we are a year in.
Yeah.
And I ran the math yesterday. The first year we had 13,685 downloads between audio and YouTube. And then this year, leading up to when I just ran the numbers yesterday, which isn't even a full quite year, was about 83,000.
Wow.
So from 14, and then it's 6x in year 2. So if we get 6x again, that'll push us closer to 1 million in a year.
The whole world would know of the Ecommerce Alley.
That's the goal. World domination is the least we can expect.
Of course. I think it's crazy the odds that we ended up having our 100th episode also on the start of season 3 of the podcast. I mean,
on the same day. We released the first episode on December 4th, 2021.
Yeah, the odds
and today is December.
In our favor, I guess.
December 4th, 2023, 100 episodes. And we skipped a few last year. We missed them.
Well, thank goodness, because it made for a great 100th episode.
This is going to be awesome.
I'm really excited for this. I've got some questions for you. I'm excited to flip the script because you always get to do the interviewing. Now I get to do the interview.
Oh, finally.
So, yes. So
welcome to my life.
Yeah. Well, I've got some questions prepared, so let's get started. What my hope is just to kind of walk through your journey from when you started, when you were born. So we'll start there all the way. No, I'm just kidding. We'll start.
Suddenly, there was light.
Yes, yeah. No, we'll start with, I guess, when you kind of got like an entrepreneurial spirit up to today and into the future. So let's start with when. So I know your parents personally, and I have a feeling they played a role in your journey. And I'm curious, what do you feel like in your childhood did play a significant role in starting your business?
When we grew up, Mom and Dad, if you're watching this, I love you. We grew up poor. And I think they would admit to that. Like, we grew up in, I have 4 brothers and 1 sister.
Yeah.
So one of them was adopted in the family later, but like there was always 5 or 6 of us.
Yeah.
And we grew up out in the country. We're in Ashland, Ohio, and
which for anyone that doesn't know, middle of nowhere.
22,000 people here.
Yeah.
And we grow up to the point where like my mom's using cloth diapers, like so she can rewash them and use them for all of us little poopers. You know what I mean? All of us little kids.
Yeah.
And so we grew up out in the country, and my dad, always a hard worker. My mom was like the homesteader. Like she was like the mom. She took care of us. She was like tough as freaking nails, like a Viking warrior. When you have that many kids, you have to know how to wrestle them to the ground.
Yeah, because you're outnumbered.
Yeah, you're outnumbered. 5 boys is bizarre. Like that's a lot of testosterone. And so my mom was always like that. My dad was always a hard worker. And as we moved into town when I was a really young age, and I just remember my dad was like business after business, and he one thing that actually started to shift my entire perspective was when I was in high school. I shadowed him, and he joined a multi-level marketing. I don't know if I've told you this story. He joined a multi-level marketing.
Were you the one that gave him an epiphany with like the whiteboard? You drew the triangle, and you're like,
I'm like,
what
this is me, and you get 3 people, and I get 3 people. We'll all be millionaires next week. So I go to this, it's called iLearning Global, and it was all on personal development. And that was my first intro to personal development. My dad got into this. Jim Rohn was like one of the head people that like really endorsed it because it was all about personal development. And I go with my dad to Indianapolis, and we spent 2 days, and I met this guy named Dave Wood was his name. And I remember going to Subway with Dave when Dave took his whole team and my dad was on his team, and we go to Subway, and I'm walking to Subway, and I'm like 16 or 17 at the time. And I tell Dave, I'm like, Dave, like I learned about blogging because he blogged like 10 times a week, and he taught me. So there's all this old marketing stuff that used to happen. And he was making like $20,000-$30,000 a month. And I was like, Dave, what do I have to do? And he's like, you got to shake hands, you got to smile, you have to meet people, you need to meet people, and you have to put out the best content that you can with the best knowledge that you have at that moment in time. And he told me that. And so I started to blog that day. And it was called the joshcoffee.blogspot.com.
Is that still out?
I don't think so. I think I'm pulling it out. Someone go Google it. Josh Coffee Blogspot.
Okay.
That would actually be really funny if it's here.
That would be really funny. While you're talking, I'll figure it out.
While you're talking, yeah. So my dad kind of had this entrepreneurial desire, and he ended up starting a painting company that I ended up working with. But like, as I saw my dad doing all of this, I was always like, to the core, my friends, my mom's friends would always say, you're going to be an entrepreneur one day, because I try to make money from everything. I remember like all my friends would, it'd be a snow day, and they would all go like sledding at the country club that we have here, where everybody went. Yeah. And I would go grab my shovel, and I would go knock on all the doors of the people that I knew would pay me $20 to shovel their drive because I was a cute kid. Yeah. So I would go in elementary school and middle school, and I would go shovel drives, and while they're sledding, I'm making $200. You know, and so I'm like shoveling, I'm doing everything that I can, I'm mowing lawns, I'm like doing chores that my parents would pay me additionally for. And then I get into middle school, and I don't know how deep you want to go. This is a little interesting. Okay. My other business.
Do you have to bleep this out or something?
You know this story, but I don't know how deep I've gone into it. So when I was in middle school, I actually would go into the lunchroom, and I wouldn't bring lunch. Instead, I would use my lunchbox, and I found I could actually get 6 cream sodas in there that I paid 35 cents a piece from the local gas station.
Cream sodas used to be 35 cents a piece.
35 cents right out of the...
Man, you're really old.
I know. Back when they were a nickel.
Yeah. Back in my day.
And I would sell them for $1 a piece, which is like, hey, that's a 2.5x markup, right? Yeah. And I would sell 6 of those a day. So I would sell 5 days a week. I'm selling $30 in soda minus the cogs, right?
Yeah, of course.
And my
that's
time
what you
to
were
walk
thinking
to the
about
gas
then,
station.
right?
I was thinking about that. 65%, 65 cents in profit per one.
Of course. And
then there was this one day that this is the part where anyone who's don't look any differently at me, okay? Or listen to any differently of me. Okay, so I remember this one day, my cousin, he lived up the road from me, and he calls me, he's like, dude, he's like, run up to my back window, my mom's about to clean my room, and I'm gonna drop you a binder. Do whatever you want with it. I don't want it anymore. And I'm like, okay.
It's very secretive.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, I don't even know what it's about. And he calls me on the home phone that we had back then. And you probably don't know what that's like either.
I won't comment on that one.
All right. So then I run up to his house, and I like run up through, there's like these woods that connected us, and we're in town, and so I run up through these woods, and I go to his back door, and he's like, here, and he drops it out the window, and it's a binder, and I grab it, and I just like run home. And then I get home, and I go to my room, and like, what the heck is this? And I open it, and it's like these 1980s Playboys. Like, these are like really old. I had never seen this in my life. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm 7th grade, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to think. I had never experienced that before. I wasn't like, my dad wasn't like a biker guy that had pinups all over. I never knew that world. I'm like, that's so different to me. And so I decided, well, I've never seen this. This is interesting. I'm going to take this to school and show it to the guys. And so I take all these old porno mags in this thick binder, and I had like 10 of them. And I took them to school at the lunch table, and I just opened it up. I'm like, guys, check it out what my cousin gave to me. And all of the guys were like, dude, you got porn magazines? and I was like, yeah. And one guy's like, how much would you rent me one for? And then like, boom, the little light bulb went off.
Shoveling is no more.
Shoveling. I'm like, wait, I have to go do work to shovel.
Yeah.
This is passive.
Yeah.
And I'm like, 50 cents a night. And like, done. And all 10 of my magazines were rented out forever.
Oh my gosh.
Well, forever until we got caught. But but I ran them out, so I'm making $5 a day, and there is zero cost of goods in here. And I'm like,
true.
This is $25 in profit a week plus all my soda profit.
And it's almost a subscription at that point.
It's pretty much just, and we're renting out to all these different guys until eventually someone was bragging about it at the lunch table a few months in, and I got busted.
Now I have heard this story before, and I remember you telling me that you even outsourced. And I feel like we have to talk about this because you outsourced your porn magazine distribution.
So that is the next, I learned the next layer of entrepreneurship.
Of course.
The first is you got to get your hands dirty, you figure it out, and then you can start to hire people to do stuff. And so what I did was I had my friend Alex at the time. I said, Alex, I'll tell you what, I'm like doing all these classes, I'm getting soda and stuff like this.
So you're still selling the soda.
I was like,
and the magazines at the same time.
I was like, I'll give you 1/4 of everything we collect if you just meet up with the guys, because I was getting annoyed walking all over the school every day, like trading with a million different guys who'd give me $1 here, $2 there, 50 cents here. And so Alex started doing that for me. And then when we got busted, it was actually, I went one day to my locker's all like ruffled. I'm like, what the heck happened to my locker? And then I found out later that they had to search my locker. And then and it ended up, I remember sitting in the principal's office, and they confronted me about it. And I was like, no, I wouldn't do anything. I wasn't doing anything like that. And they're like, well, that's interesting because we brought 19 young men in here, and every one of them gave us your name. And then, of course, I was like, all right, you got me.
Man, they did the research
I got inspo detention, and this was the worst thing ever. And I had to, and the worst part was he made me call my mom right then and there. And he's like, okay, we got to call your parents. We got to let them know what happened. And I'm like, no. So
that's even worse.
He puts it on speakerphone, he dials, and I'm like, Dad, please pick up. Dad, please pick up. And he's like, this is Chris Coffee. I'm like, shoot, this is my mom. And I'm like, and he's like, hey, this is Principal, I forget his name at the time. Josh has something he wants to tell you. And so I had to tell my mom this. And so I tell my mom this, and you could just tell she's biting her lip, just like he's going to get it when he gets home. So I avoided going home until like evening. So I left, and I go avoid it, and I get home, and she's just waiting there on the couch. It's like I was just walking in as the criminal. She flips the
light on.
It's like, I was walking in to be detained and taken to prison. Yeah. And I wasn't able to, I was grounded this happened at the end of the year too, so I was grounded all summer long for like 3 or 4 months. I couldn't see my friends. It was the worst. But anyway,
how much did you make? At least $20, right?
I probably made a couple $100 doing it. So
I mean,
over the 2 months
in 7th grade?
Yeah.
That's good money for 7th grade.
Yeah.
So you're renting porn magazines, and then when was like when you started getting more serious and getting into business? So as I kind of got into high school, so I turned my whole life around. She put me in a private Christian school. Yeah, I forgot about that. So that's when you started going to Christian school.
She put me in a Christian school with like 11 people in the class. Yeah. And of course, I walk in, and I'm just like this, ragtag. Yeah, I'm this out. I'm this.
Didn't you get detention first day?
I got a week of lunch detention my first day because I threatened a teacher. Yeah, it was really bad. Anyway, I was a different person than I am today. But anyway, so they put me there. I'm still not good after my 8th grade year, and then they homeschooled me for like 2 years, and I just played RuneScape video games all day, every day. But it was great. Anyway, it turned my life around, and then I go back to school, and I join a band. I get really heavy into music. That's kind of my go-to. I become a musician, and in this band, I make great friends with a guy named Derek, and he's an unbelievable drummer. Trained, and he's older than me, so he went off to college and he became like really professionally trained. And after high school, I go to college, and I go to college for 1 week. And in the first week, I go to my business 101 class, and the teacher there was like, "Hey, I just want to apologize to everyone in advance because for the last 15 years, I taught 7th grade alternative students, and this is my first year teaching college and business." And
how much are you paying for college?
Yeah, I know, right? And I raised my hand, and I was like, "So, have you ever owned a business? Have you ever, like, what kind of knowledge do you have around business?" She's like, "Well, no, I just ended up getting hired by the school." And then
to just read this textbook to you?
What?
To just read this textbook to you?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so that day I actually I went in and I put in. We were on quarters at the time. It was 9 weeks at a time that you were committing to.
Yeah.
So I went and put in my resignation. I dropped out before the end of the quarter. And I'm like, if she can teach me business, this is probably the arrogant side of 19-year-old Josh. I'm like, I could figure this out because there's a thing called Google out there.
Yeah. So Google did exist at this time.
Google still existed
all right,
back in the day, right? This is 2012. And so I drop out, and after I drop out, I'm like, well, I got to make money. So I started working with my dad's painting company. And as I'm working with my dad's painting company, I'm trying to help him close deals. I'm like, while I'm there and I'm working, I said, "Hey, Dad, every time we're going to go buy me door hangers. If we're at a job site and I'm with the guys and you're like, I'm going to canvas the entire neighborhood while I'm here to try to get more business." So my mind was always thinking in terms of new customer acquisition.
Yeah.
Which is funny how now that I think about that.
Yeah.
So I was thinking like an owner and an entrepreneur and giving it 100% even when I only made $12 an hour, whatever the heck it was back then.
Yeah.
And so I'm working for my dad, and my friend comes back from college and he says, "Hey, I have this idea of starting a drumming education company. And are you interested?" I said, "Yeah." So I end up moving from working with my dad, and I joined forces with my really good friend, and then my other 2 brothers joined the company as well because we were all in a band together. Mm-hmm. So we all joined this, and we called it Flight Drummers. And what we decided to do was, this was like 2013, 2012. This was 2012 actually. Before online education was really that big. I want think about it. 2012. Courses and high ticket coaching and all that wasn't really even
YouTube
a thing.
wasn't even fairly new at the time.
YouTube was so new.
Yeah.
And so we rented for a few $100s a month this old dusty. It was in an old warehouse. It was abandoned, but the owner of it's like, "Hey, there's these 2 offices in there you can rent for $200 a month." And we're like, "Great!" So we took these 2 offices. We cut out a hole, put some glass in there because we wanted a studio. And we soundproofed it with like eggshell foam that we spray painted black because we didn't have money for.
I bet that worked well.
Just ricocheted the sound back. It was a little helpful for sound treatment. And then we literally set up cameras, and we were scrappy, and we bought used cameras on eBay and stuff like that. And we started filming drum lessons, and we started filming YouTube videos. And that was my first foray into the online world.
Yeah.
And I started an Instagram account back when Instagram had just come out. And we got an Instagram account. We had a Facebook page. We started YouTube. And in the first year of YouTube, we broke 1 million views on the channel and over 50,000 subs in the first 12 months.
Yeah.
And then we added, we got subscribers for our drum lessons. If anyone isn't familiar with drum lessons, you usually pay by the half hour. So it's usually like $25 to $50 depending on the market. And we're like, hey, ours is $25 a month, and you get access to all of this stuff. In constant growing archive, and we're bringing in these unbelievably talented name brand drummers to come teach, and so we got to a few hundred subscribers in like 22 countries because we did this anywhere, and that happened in the first year. We're still only making a few $1,000 a month. So we're pretty much broke, right? Yeah. We're broke, but we're all 19. We're like
making progress.
Living with mom and dad. We're trying to understand it. Our Instagram started to grow past 10,000. We started blogging, and we had our blog at 20,000 readers a month. So I'm learning all kinds of social media. Mm-hmm. I'm learning email. I'm learning Facebook ads eventually when we found that out.
Yeah.
And Facebook was so new in 2012.
Yeah.
And so we started learning all of these different things, but unfortunately, we moved to this point where this is growing and becoming a serious thing. We're becoming known and we're getting sponsors from, if anyone here is a drummer, you got like DW and Sonar and Zildjian.
Yeah.
And we're starting to get in
Those are
mind,
big names.
like we're getting a lot of like sponsors for things that we're doing.
Yep.
And we're working with, like we started working with like Mariah Carey's drummer and Stevie Wonder's drummer, and all these different drummers are in the drumming community starting to know us, and they're coming to our stuff and they're filming with it. It was really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And it was embarrassing because they would come in and we'd go to this warehouse in the middle of nowhere, go up these sketchy stairs, and then we're in this like little studio room.
Yeah.
And but it was really cool. They respected it. They're like, this is awesome because we're all young and hungry. And but unfortunately, it got to this point where my business owner, our values kind of clashed, and our leadership styles, and also we're young. We're dumb.
Yeah.
By this point, I'm 20. I'm in my 20s, and I'm just like, I think I'm better than everyone, and he thinks he's better than everyone. And when you got a bunch of egos in the room, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So we break up, and that was my first business 12 years ago.
Yeah.
From the time of right now.
That's. I mean, it sounds like you figured it out, like you said you would when you left college. You figured it out. But there's still a lot more to get into here, because now Flight Drummers is gone. Because obviously now we know Flight Media and marketing. How did Flight Media come out of Flight Drummers? Obviously there's a connection there. The name is similar.
Yeah.
What is the connection in the name, first off?
So we had Flight Drummers because we love the idea of going to the next level, like taking flight, like going to that next level.
Yep.
And so while we're doing Flight Drummers, we're making a few $1,000s a month. We're figuring this out. We're young, we're hungry, but we're also literally trying to eat because we're hungry. And so we're like, we got to figure something out.
So both metaphorically hungry and also actually hungry.
Actually,
Okay.
literally. All right.
Gotcha.
We're hungry on both sides. And so then we meet with a guy that we really admired from the community. And he's like, you guys are so good at this marketing stuff. You should go on this thing it's called Elance at the time, and now it's called Upwork.com. He's like, you should go on Elance. And he's like, and people are putting jobs on there all the time. He's like, just, if you need to make more money, just go there. You can charge whatever, and you can make another couple $1,000s a month, like designing gorgeous websites like you did, or managing social media. And so we're like, okay, we need to make some supplemental income while we're building the beast, or building the machine. So let's go do that. So we did that in the first 45 days. We made like $6,500 freelancing with just him and I.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, there's potential here. But he didn't really like it because he's a musician.
Yeah.
And I'm a marketer guy, and I love all of that.
You just
and
know
so
music.
I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, so I was the business end, he was the talent. And I took to that. And so when we started to butt heads, we came to an agreement. We sat down for lunch, and I said, why don't you take Flight Drummers, and I will take Flight Media.
Okay.
And that's how we started Flight Media, by the way. We just said, we needed a name, so we just threw it and said Flight Media. Yeah. And we started an LLC for $125, and then we ended up splitting ways. Like
$125.
Yep, that's how much it is in Ohio.
So what did Flight Media, so when you, after lunch that day, what were the first steps of Flight Media?
We leave, and then I immediately go to, I'm like, I need volume here, because when you're freelancing online, there are people that post jobs, and if you go submit to 100 jobs, there's a probability of getting kicked. So I just went and I started submitting volumes of jobs, but I was smart. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to take out, the phones didn't really do video at the time. I'm going to use a webcam that's really crappy. Now that I look back, but it was great back then. Yeah. And I'm going to film a little video of me, upload it to YouTube, and send them that video, because now it shows I'm a real person. This isn't a copy and paste proposal. Yeah. And so I started landing gigs like crazy. And so we got to the point where I was like, I need help with this. And so I figured, I'm going to go on Upwork, and I'm going to hire somebody to start helping me. Okay. And so I post this gig online, and I say, hey, I read the 4-Hour Work Week, and I don't know, Tim Ferriss, he wrote a book on 4-Hour Work Week. I've heard you talk about it, yeah. It's a really popular book. I'm sure many people listening have read the 4-Hour Work Week. The concept is great. The reality is not practical. So he talked about virtual assistants and having someone to help with all kinds of things.
So how soon after starting Flight Media was that?
This was like 3 months in. Okay. I'm like, let's go. I'm going to hire someone to help me. I'm making $6,000, $5,000 a month. Yeah. And so I went and put an ad online, and I had a lot of people fill it out, and there was one girl named Maya, and she was from Montenegro, which if you don't know where Montenegro is, it's right on Mediterranean Sea, and it's right by Italy. It's kind of over in that whole area in Croatia. So beautiful, beautiful place. Actually, the most beautiful place I've been to in my entire life. It's gorgeous. You got the forest, the seaside, the country. It's amazing.
That's cool.
Anyway, so I ended up bringing Maya on for an assistant. I'm like 10 hours a week, and I brought her to full time within a month because she was just amazing. She picked up, and then she started doing the marketing, and it was like 1 year in, and Maya's like, I want to be a business partner, and I'm like, no, I already did this once. I'm not doing this again. I'm not a fool. And she was persistent about it. And then 5 years in, I ended up making her a business partner, which was really amazing because she was just unbelievable. Yeah. She treated the business like her own. She was just an amazing human being.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we did that. That's in Montenegro. And then as we're kind of growing, we opened an office in Montenegro. We had our office here in Ashland, Ohio. And then I made a connection with somebody over Twitter up in Canada. And this is up near Ottawa, Canada. And her name was Ashley. She was a designer. And we were starting to get into web design at the time because we're doing marketing services and we're getting into web design. And so I'm like, okay, so we hired Ashley.
What-ish year is this?
This is like 2014, 2015.
So 2-3 years after starting.
Yeah, and here's the crazy thing. So the first year, it was just Maya and I. And we did like $59,000 in sales. Okay. The second year, we did almost $300,000 in sales.
Wow.
Yeah, so we started to grow pretty fast. So in that second year is when Ashley started to come on board. Okay. So we had an Ohio office, a Montenegro office, and then Ashley's like, well, I need an office. Yeah. And then me, being a 20-something idiot who doesn't understand finance, is like, sure, because my vanity and my ego is like, yeah, let's do this, right? I want offices in 3 countries. That's the coolest thing to say. But it was dumb. It made no sense. So we hire Ashley. Ashley starts building a team. We got a developer named Chris. By the way, Chris is still on our team today. He's amazing. And we got Julia. And so we have these 3 offices. And as the business started growing, so we go from like, let's call it 60,000 to 300. Mm-hmm. So we 5x gross revenue. Yeah. Important key there, gross revenue. In the first 2 years, between year 1 and year 2. And as we're kind of growing there, we started buying stuff. As you typically start growing, you start seeing some degree of success. You get really excited. And so you start creating chaos in your business, I believe, by just buying crap. Yeah. And so we started buying software. We bought sit-stand desks. We had 3 offices with 12 people. And 3 were there, 3 were in Montenegro, and 6 were in Ohio. And we bought all these offices, but we could all work remote. We didn't need offices. Yeah. It was ego. It was vanity. I was like, it felt good to say, oh, we have 3 offices in 3 countries, and we have 12 employees.
I mean, it's cool. It's from cool an outside perspective, for sure.
It's cool to say. From a highlight reel standpoint, it's great. Obviously, we're hemorrhaging cash in the meantime of that. But like, so we're just buying stuff that we don't need. We're doing team retreats in year 2 where I spent like $8,000 or something on that team retreat. I'm like, I had no business doing that. Yeah. But I saw everyone else in the startup world, and it's a cool thing to do. So we're buying all of this stuff and just destroying our financial position. Yeah. Which got really, really tough. We're overhired. You're talking $300,000 in revenue with 12 staff. Do the math on that. Yeah. We were idiots. So I was an idiot. I'll own it.
So speaking of staff, obviously we've talked about this I remember at lunch one time, you were telling me some stories about hiring people, and one of the ones that you told me was about somebody, you brought them on, and you were going over the company handbook, and they got frustrated about that. And then there was another one where you fired the guy, and I think you were like looking through the email just to tie up some loose ends and found something questionable. Yeah. So talk about those, because those are so funny.
Yeah. So the hardest part about business, aside from the mental fortitude that it takes, is people. Yeah. If you're going to build anything substantial, you can't do it without people. And Dave Ramsey has a great quote in his book, EntreLeadership, and he says, leadership is easy unless people are involved. There's no such thing as leadership without people. Yeah. And so you learn the signs. And at first, I hired people because I met him once. And I hired Ben for 4 years. I met him at Starbucks. I'm like, dude, you ever think about joining a marketing company? He's like, what's that? And I'm like, come with me. And so he works for us for 4 years. So like, that was my thing. I would just go find people, and I'm like, I got intuition. I have like this discernment. That person's a good person. Hire them. So I'm doing all this. But when you do that, you also make mistakes. Yeah. And we made many people mistakes. I remember hiring a girl in who came in, and we paid her more than everybody else. And within 3 months, she came and she was asking for like a several dollar an hour raise because she had a college degree that she just finished graduating in fashion merchandising. I'm like, we're not merchandising anything here, honey.
Just because I have a degree.
And then I hired this one guy His name was Lou. We won't say the last name. He probably doesn't listen to
This is the handbook.
This is the handbook guy. Okay. This is the most bizarre experience I have had in my entire life. On his first day, we hire this guy into the company, and I thought I checked all the boxes. Oh man, we did everything. I took him and his wife to dinner with my wife to just see that we vibe with them, which we did. And then we get in, we hire him. We're going through the handbook, and he's cool with everything. And then we get to this part where he learned in the handbook, we give a lot of days off.
Yeah.
By the way, we do unlimited PTO.
Yeah.
Dylan knows that.
Yeah.
It's a cool benefit here. And we take the last 2 weeks of the year off, and we do paid team retreat, and we have 10 holidays throughout the year.
Yeah. It's not a concern.
Not a concern at all. Of days off, we have 10 mandatory paid off holidays and a team retreat, expense paid, and 2 weeks off, and you get whatever you want. Yeah. And he saw that we didn't take off Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Very strange. And, but by the way,
which
any non-governmental companies do not take Martin Luther King Jr. Day off. The private sector. So anyway, we're going through the handbook, and he was fine. He goes with my wife Kelsey, who does all of our employee HR stuff. She goes through the handbook, and then he like messages me and said, "Hey, can we talk real quick?" And I'm like, "Sure." So I walk over to his office, and he's like, "Hey, so I was going through the handbook, and I noticed you don't take Martin Luther King Jr. Day off." And I'm like, "No, yeah, we don't take it off. Just like we don't take off Valentine's Day, and we don't take Christopher Columbus Day off.
Yeah.
And we don't take a lot of other days off."
Yeah.
And he's like,
President's
Day. President's Day. There's a million I can name, right? I'm like, "Yeah, we don't take it off." I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well," and he just kind of leans in. He's like, "Sounds racist."
The nerve. And this is how many days in?
You got to bleep that out, by the way. That's not the language that I use.
Yes.
But that's what he told me.
Yeah.
And then I leaned into him, and I'm just like, "Lou, you need to take a step back, and you need to rethink what you just told me, because today's your first day."
First day.
First day. And he calls me an effing racist.
Insane.
And I'm like, guess what? I don't celebrate Christopher Columbus Day. I don't celebrate, and I listed off all these other holidays. And I was like, if you think that it's racist to not take a day off, that, by the way, 97.9% of the world that is non-governmental does not take off, then it's probably not a good fit. And he's like, "Well, no, I was just wondering." I'm like, "But you just called me an effing racist."
Yeah, like
that was the craziest thing. Yeah.
Like you can ask, like, "Hey, why don't we?" It's another thing to just come out and just on day one.
So that's a teller, right? So the teller of his character, who he is,
so you probably
his
fired
attitude,
him like the next week.
how he thinks. Yeah, he made it a couple weeks. He made it less than a month. Yeah. And then he started to fight me when I fired him. But anyway,
of course,
that was one. I mean, we had a guy that like was here for like 5 months, and in that time it was a really bad fit, and then he ends up leaving. Just texts and says, "Oh, I'm done, by the way," and I'm like, I don't get how people do that. It's the strangest thing. So we had to like get his computer, and we're like cleaning things out. And so we went through emails to make sure we weren't missing anything. And we came to find out that he was threatening to kill some guy with a barbed wire bat if he ever did whatever again. I'm just like, I have a knack for picking the psychoest people ever.
And that was within 5 months of working here?
Yeah. So we are, and it had been going on for months. So like now I'm like, we're really gun shy in hiring. First of all, because I understand the financial pain that comes with that, and what we endured from it, but also because I have seen so many situations play out that now when we hire, it's like, we are very intentional about vetting and understanding them and taking them out to lunch with the team to get a feel for them and having them trial it. And like, so we're really intentional now. And those are just lessons you learn as you grow.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because I think you've mentioned a lot of lessons already as we've been talking. What do you feel like was like the biggest learning moment? Because now we're 5-6 years in or so. What is the biggest learning moment that you feel like you had in the first few years of Flight Media?
Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot.
The biggest.
I'll try to put just one. I think that, and this is still today, I still feel this today, is that to go to the next level, you can't be the same person that you were. And so like, you have to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
We just reinvented ourselves 2 years ago with Ecommerce Alley. We rebranded, which we're going to get to, we'll probably talk about that. Going from Flight Media to the Ecommerce Alley, we rebranded 2 years ago. We had to reinvent ourselves from nothing. And so as you go, you have to reinvent yourself. You have to I did not have empathy. I was really bad at that. I'm a logical guy. Obviously, I'm a numbers guy, right? I'm what some people would say a type A, right? I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm very outspoken about that. I'm very charismatic. But with that, you can also come across like a bull in a china shop.
Yeah.
You can wreck people. And so when you're that young too, you know everything. And that was part of the problem. Like when I would talk to mentors and other people that were further ahead of me that I'm admiring and trying to become like, I have this big head. I have this massive ego. And that ego made every conversation come back to me. So when I was talking to our team, when I was talking to clients, when I was talking to other people about our business, everything was about me. And it was never about other people. It took me years to really figure that out. Yeah. And as we've grown now, you look at the culture, you're in here.
Yeah.
What, from your perspective, you've worked at other places. And now you came in after I figured a lot of this crap out.
Yes.
So you come in now.
Yeah.
What's the experience the last 2 years that you've been here? Well, 2-ish.
Yeah. I think it's been 2, but full-time, like year and a half. Experience what? Sorry?
What is the experience here now versus other places you've been? Because I've become very intentional with creating that. I
think the biggest thing is there's a lot of ownership that every single person on the team takes over their own position. Like it's not you micromanaging every single person. Everybody has their own, they take control of what they're supposed to take control of. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge deal because other places will, like, you have to do it exactly this way and you have to do it just like this. And I think being able to have ownership and be proud of what you do is really important. And that's what I think. And I feel like that comes back to the ego and being a good leader is allowing your team to own their own stuff, you know?
Yeah, I know. I would agree with that. And actually, now that you mentioned that, I micromanage like crazy. Like I'm obsessive over the output of what we do.
Yeah.
So the quality of what we do, and I'm sure somebody listening or watching this, like they feel the same way. Like you obsess over the quality of what you do. You will put out nothing subpar.
Yeah.
But because of that, it also hinders you from growth because you have to
stamp
everything. You become the greatest bottleneck. And so again, to go to the next level, you have to reinvent yourself. You have to change because you can't be the same person today. Like if you're riding solo right now, you're not going to be able to behave the same, talk the same. Things are going to be different when you're at one person than when you're at 5 people, than when you're at 10 people, than when you're at 100 people. So you have to constantly reinvent yourself, and you have to intentionally work on becoming a better leader.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing. People don't take it intentionally. They just say like, oh, I'm a business owner, and then they don't sit down and say, how do I become a better leader? How do I communicate better? I have to learn to be a master communicator if I want to build a massive
You have to grow yourself.
Organization. You have to grow. And one thing that I learned is that you have to do things with grace and you have to do things with understanding. And when you're working with people, the hardest challenge of our growth that has bottlenecked us next year, our trajectory is we've tightened a lot of things.
Yeah.
I believe our team will probably double next year. I told Kelsey that last night. And in doing that, you have to have systems for how you handle people. So when someone's not doing well, a bad leader, a manager is what I would call that person. They're just a manager, not a leader.
Yeah.
They're just by role, by title. A bad manager or leader is just going to blame the person without taking in consideration. Did that person just lose a baby? Did that person just lose a mom? Is that person going through divorce right now? What's going on in their life?
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to look at things like that. Like if someone wasn't doing what they needed to do, I have a 3-step process. I say, number 1, is this a leadership issue? Mm-hmm. Did I not equip you? Did I not coach you? Did I not help you? Did I not give you what you needed to win? And if not, I own it. I don't look further than that.
Yeah.
If I did, then I'm going to look and say, is it a personal issue?
Yeah.
Are you going through something? We had a girl actually, Ashley up in Canada. When we hired her, she worked for us for multiple years, but toward the end there was a time where she was just like, things were off. She was all over the place. She was like haywire. Like she was like really tense all the time, attitude. And I said, what's going on? Because I've given you everything you need to win.
Yeah.
And she said, my husband and I are getting divorced and it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I said, take the whole next month off and it's paid.
Yeah.
Take the next month off. Do what you need to do. Be with your family. Be present. Figure it out. and come back and let's hit this again at the start of the year. So she took a whole month of December off. She came back, nothing changed. And so at that point, is a personal issue, but then it comes to, is it a leadership problem, a personal problem, or is it a them problem? And when it's a them problem, then unfortunately you have to cut ties. So you learn those things, but I would say that constantly having to reinvent myself was critical. And you have to if you're going to go to that next level. And removing your ego, being empathetic, and being able to have grace in conversations and take other perspectives and ideas, even if you disagree with it. Like you and I, we disagree on stuff all the time. Like we're like, hey, we should do this. And you're like, I don't think we should do it for this, and this reason. I'm like, I think we should do it for this, and this reason. And then we kind of come to an agreement, and we're like, okay, we're going one of these ways.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And
I think it creates the best output when we come together and go through different things.
But if you have big ego, it's my way or the highway, and you will kill your organization so fast like that.
Yeah, and I think it's almost hard to imagine you a different way because of me coming in after all of this change. It doesn't feel like it was ever anything different, you know? Yeah. So I've never felt like you aren't open to anything, you know? And I think that's really cool. And you always seem so compassionate about the team. Like we always start every team meeting just talking about our weekend, talking about just being a community, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
So you've talked about now your ego, leadership, people mistakes. What would you say was like the biggest culmination of everything? I guess like the most impactful thing that happened in those first few years?
Obviously, we're learning lots of things.
Yeah.
I got very distracted, and I'd be happy to talk about some of the business ventures that start to happen once you get good at something.
Yeah.
Then suddenly opportunity arrives. When you start having a degree of success, opportunity comes in. Your ideas start to flow, and you're like, "Ooh, I can take this and do this over here and over here and over here." And for me, one of the best things that ever happened to us early on, I lucked out. Not everybody has this opportunity, but I had a mentor. I actually met him on Twitter, ironically, and I was big on Twitter at the time, or X now. Mm-hmm. And his name was Jeffrey Gitomer, and he wrote this book. He's written over like a dozen books, but the biggest book he ever wrote was called The Little Red Book of Selling. If anyone's been in sales, it's like a staple in the sales world. He wrote the Little Gold Book of Yes Attitude and all these other things, personal development on sales and communication. And so, of course, I naturally I connect with him.
Yeah.
And so Jeffrey lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he introduced me to some people would say how the other half lives.
Okay.
And he introduced me to what is possible.
Yeah.
And how big thinking you can become. Because we grew up in this small town, right?
Yeah.
And here, the thinking is only so big. As much as I hate to say it, the thinking is only so big. We're part of a Facebook group called the Ashland Chatter. And everyone's chattering about whatever. And everyone's wow, why did they do this to their window? And why did they change this? And it's the most minute, stupid, worthless, mind-numbing stuff.
Yeah.
Why does anybody care? And so that's when you're surrounded in this, sometimes you got to change the environment.
The fact that our whole community can be in one Facebook group says it all. That's all that needs to be said.
It's so funny. And
it's like 17,000 people in this one Facebook group, and that's
22,000 people in Ashland.
Yeah. So do the math.
Yeah. So so when you grow up in a small environment, everyone knows everything about everyone, and there's a small town thinking. Now there are big thinkers and big people doing big things in this town.
It's the minority.
But I meet Jeffrey. He invites me down to Charlotte to speak at one of his events for his advisors. And Jeffrey, Little Red Book of Selling sold more than 10 million books.
Wow.
And he sold tens of millions.
Yeah.
Jeffrey went and delivered speeches for Fortune 500 companies. They would pay him $50,000 to talk to their salespeople for an hour. They would pay his first class flights there. They would pay all the incidentals. They would pay for anything he did while he was there, all the hotels and the stay. Unbelievable. Like to imagine me coming from this place where it's like, hey, you get a job and you go make $50K a year and it's the American dream.
Yeah.
And he makes $50,000 from an hour of speaking after all of his expenses are paid.
Yeah.
It's a whole new level. And so Jeffrey invites me down. I speak at this event. Of course, I speak on social media at the time. We were big on social media. We didn't do a whole lot of paid ads right out of the gates.
Yeah.
We started getting into the heavier as we grew. But I speak on this, and then after I speak on this to all of these people that come to pay to get certified to advise in his frameworks, I had all this business. We had like so many people like, can we work with you? Can we work with you? So I got all this exposure, and so he helped grow my business, and he kind of took me under his wing. And to the point where every 1 to 2 months, we're up in Ohio and he is down there, and I was too broke to fly. So Kelsey and I would hop and drive 8 hours to Charlotte once a month, every other month for like 2 years. And Jeffrey he had 16 lofts in downtown Charlotte, and they were interconnected with like spiral staircases, and he had his offices in there with multiple of them, and like it was the coolest thing. He had this housekeeper called named Elizabeth, and Elizabeth was amazing. Kelsey and I would stay, and she would make stuff for us. She would do our clothes. She would do our bed. I'm like, is this what it was like? Is this what Richie Rich looked like? Like, is this? And he's not even like a billionaire or anything, but he's very affluent, very wealthy, very successful. And I started to see like, whoa, this is possible. I never in my life had experienced that. And I was fortunate enough too. And one thing about Jeffrey is everywhere we went, he always took care of us. He always paid the bill. I mean, one day he's like, hey, do you guys want to, like, he had a place in Manhattan, and he's like, you want to go to Broadway? And I'm like, you want to go watch the Book of Mormon on Broadway? And we're like, sure. So we hop and we go to watch the Book of Mormon right near Times Square, or right off Broadway. And then we went to Times Square after that. And we're there, and I remember pulling up my ticket, and we had the best seats in the house. And I sit there, and I pull up my ticket, and it says $895 for my ticket. I look at Kelsey's. I'm like, this dude just paid $3,600 for us to sit here for 3 hours.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, what in the world? Like, there's a whole different level.
Yeah.
And but he wasn't arrogant. He wasn't cocky about it. He wasn't flaunting of it. He was humble. When you talk to people, everyone in every restaurant knew him. They would come up and he'd be like, hey, this is my man Josh. Josh is, if you ever need anything marketing, he's the best. He's the most talented person on the entire planet.
That's cool.
On this. So he talked everybody up. He was a wonderful communicator, and he showed me how important attitude and mindset was, and how you can accomplish anything in knowing your value.
Yeah.
And it was a year in, and I had this opportunity that someone said, hey, we'd love you to come speak at this event. It was a franchise company. They did several $1 billion a year. And they said, what's your speaking fee? And I was like, well, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Yeah.
And I called Jeffrey. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? And he's like, if you don't charge them $20,000 for this speech, I'm going to fly up to Hodink, Ashland, Ohio, and I'm going to kick your ass. That's what he told me.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't care how many cornfields I have to drive to get there. And so I call this big company back, and they're like, so what's your speaking fee? I said, well, it's and I'm like sweating on the other end of the phone. I'm like, and I tried to as coolly and calmly as possible tell her. I was like, well, so it'll be $20,000 for the speaking fee, and then travel for my wife and I, stay, and then incidentals while we're there. And she's like, okay, yeah, sounds good. Go ahead and send the contract over. How do you take payments? And I'm just like, and I'm like, oh, so we take, and I just had to like make something up. I didn't think that far ahead. And I'm like, yeah, so we usually do $10,000 up front, and then $10,000. It was like a week or a month before the actual event. She's like, all right, sounds good. Yeah. And a week later, I get this check the certified check in the mail, and it's like $10,000 to Josh Coffee. And I got it, and I just cried. Yeah. And I'm like, this is so cool. Emotional. And we actually used that to pay off a ton of debt at the time. And so I actually have it framed in my office. It was just such an eye-opening moment to say there is possibility that you can do more than you may think, and the marketplace determines your value. And my value at that time became worth $20,000 to deliver a speech. It was amazing. Yeah. It was a lot of work. You know, it was crazy being there. There's like George Bush is there. There's all these people that were speaking. There were 5 major speakers and Josh Coffee in that roster. Wow. And it was like I was like 22, I think, at the time, and I didn't know anything. You know, so the fact compared to what some of these guys had actually been through. Yeah. So Jeffrey is my mentor for a long time. Yeah. And then he encouraged me to move. And he said, I think you need to get out of this small place. It gives you a lot of small thinking. And he moved me he said, find somewhere that you really love. And so at a little while after he said that, I ended up landing on a place that I really loved visiting, now Scottsdale, Arizona. So we go to Scottsdale, and where there is more plastic surgery per capita than probably any other state. Yeah. And so it was a big move there, and it was really, really cool. So we moved there, and while we were there, that is where I made some enormous mistakes. Where it was 2017, we moved there, and while I moved there, I decided to convince a friend to move there, and I wanted to start another business, and we called it LAG, Lounge in Game. I was into video games, but I was into CrossFit. I paid $150 a month to go to a CrossFit. I'm like, hey, if I'm willing to pay this, there are these other people that would never go to a gym, but they obsess over video games. It's all they play. And I knew there was a market for that. And I'm like, why don't we create a hub where they can pay a monthly subscription to come, a monthly membership to come in, and we have the top computers ever. We host tournaments, we host all kinds of stuff. There's food, there's snacks. Let's create something. We called it LAG, which in the video game world, lag is usually not a good thing. But it just kind of went with it. We built this brand, we got the software we needed. We went through all this work, and we started Lounge in Game. Then I bought a course on real estate wholesaling, which basically means
that's like you get way out of left field.
Yeah, so basically means like someone is really motivated to sell their property. You get them in contract, you assign the contract, and you take the gap. Hard to explain that in a nutshell, but that's pretty much it. So we called it the home buyer dudes, and one of our employees, Steven, actually he moved out to Arizona with me, and so we're both working remote in this incredible complex we both lived in. And we started Home Buyer Dudes. And I remember we're driving around. They're called bandit signs. When it says like, we buy houses for cash. Have you ever seen any of those around town, right? So that's not how it actually works. How it works is you say that, people call you, and they want to sell their house, and they're like, I want to sell the house. And you're like, great. And you have a list of cash buyers that are willing to buy properties from you. And then you get them in contract, and you assign it to one of those guys, and you take the gap. So we started doing real estate wholesaling. And I remember it's like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. Every weekend, we're driving around Phoenix and Scottsdale, and we have zip ties and these hundreds of, they're called bandit signs because you're not allowed to do it. Only bandits go in the dead of night, so that's why they're called bandit signs.
If you have to put the signs up at night with zip ties, you're probably not supposed to do it.
And so like we're like stringing these things up to like stop signs and poles and like all kinds of stuff. And so we're doing that. While we're doing that, we decide, we have some friends back in North Carolina. They're like, hey, we've been talking about real estate for a long time. We decided to go in and buy our first vacation home together in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, which is right near Gatlinburg. If anyone's not familiar, it's kind of like, it's the second most touristed place in America, second to Las Vegas. It's like the Midwestern.
It's like the gold mine, Vegas. Like it's all old country and Smoky
Mountains.
It's the opposite of Vegas because it's all like low tech. Like it's just it's essentially like Vegas.
It's cool, and we've been down there. We've been down there with you guys. So we bought this first vacation property. It's grown a lot since then. That was one of the great decisions we made. But we then bought that, and then finally the last thing we did. That's it, right? Then the
so we're 4 now, right?
4 different businesses going. And then at the end of that, we decided we're like, we work with e-commerce brands. We should start our own. Let's go into mostly guys in the company. Let's go into women's apparel. And we're going to call it, because we know how to source it and all that, we're going to call it Apparelica. Chica Apparel, I don't know. I don't know how we landed there. But we landed on Apparelica. We start this so we have like Flight Media at the time. It wasn't the Ecommerce Alley yet. So we have Flight Media. We have LAG, Lounge and Game. We have the Home Buyer Dudes. We called it Coffee Crone Vacations, which we still have today. That was a good move, let's call it. And then we started Apparelica. And so it's like this.
So all those were running at the same time?
We're running 5 businesses.
Wow.
I leave my team that's in Ohio, so I'm 3 hours behind their time zone. We have our team in Montenegro, and I'm 9 hours from them. So we're working opposite schedules. So our overlap was like, I would wake up and start work at like 5 a.m. just to get like a couple hours, 2 hours overlap with them. And so it was just really tough. And so in doing all of that, on the surface level, it all looked really great. But deep down, the problem was we're broke. Kelsey was doing HR and finance and all the accounting and all that stuff for our company, and she went and had to get a nanny job where she's working just so we can make ends meet because Scottsdale is really freaking expensive to live in. I had a whole house here in Ashland, Ohio for like $600 a month in my apartment, and this is 2017, mind you. Now the rates there are probably $2,500 for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, and it was like $1,300 or $1,400 at the time, which was 2.5 times what I had a 3-bedroom house here for. So we're living nice living for sure. She's working, and things just started to go downhill. When you start to spread so wide, it's like you just drain your resources, you drain your energy because we had so many things going. I'm like working till 1 a.m. in the morning, 2 a.m. in the morning, waking up early.
You're not I'm not a night person.
No. I'm like, if anyone doesn't know me, I love to wake up at 4:45, 5 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
My day is started.
So were you still waking up at 4 at that time, or were you all whack?
I started to go a little whack. I maintained it for a while, but eventually you just can't. I'd be waking up at 6 to 7. But usually
I was that early.
I guess if that's early, yeah.
To me, I mean,
I'd be 5-6 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so I'm getting fatigued. I'm drinking Red Bull nonstop. I start gaining. I gained like 40 pounds, I think, that year. But I'm drinking Red Bull, and it got so bad that like I was up all night long because I couldn't sleep because I suddenly developed this cough. And we didn't know what it was from. We're like, maybe I'm just fatigued or whatever. And then I had this epiphany. I wonder if it's because I've been drinking like freaking 4 Red Bulls a day. I stopped drinking the Red Bull. And a week later, my cough went away. So it's all this Red Bull that I'd been drinking. My heart's palpitating. There's all
this
this
stuff.
So you
switched to coffee, and that helped.
And then actually, that was the first year I switched to coffee. So
really,
so I never got into coffee. And then that year, I'm like, I'm gonna get off this Red Bull. I've gained all this weight. I need to start drinking black coffee, but I want to taste good. So then I started the French press, and I became a coffee connoisseur.
Yeah.
And then I ended up starting a roasting company.
Did you really?
When we moved back to Ohio.
My goodness.
I forgot to tell you about that.
I didn't even know that. No.
Really? Okay. So we do all of this, and of course, we moved 2,000 plus miles away from our family.
Yeah.
My wife, Kelsey, is a family person. I move her away from all her friends, all of her community, everything she knows. And then I go and decide to 5x the amount of workload that I have. And so I'm burned out. I'm only focused on that. And so honestly, our marriage was like not in shambles. Like it was going downhill.
Yeah.
Like we were in a bad spot because I put all this focus on me and my ego and the fact that I owned all these companies in different countries and all that crap.
Yeah.
And so our marriage is starting to go downhill, and I just felt I just created so much chaos in our life because I got in a good spot. I got this big ego. I said I got skills. I have whatever, and I have some money. So I thought I had money, but in reality we were living in lots of debt, and it was just finance from the debt. And it all looked good, and then it started to implode. And I literally felt like God said, "You got to go back." And I was like, "Okay." And I didn't want to be like Jonah. And Jonah the whale, he was supposed to go to Nineveh, and he didn't. And
you didn't want to get eaten by a whale.
He went and got eaten by a whale.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to get eaten by a whale.
I wouldn't.
That'd be uncomfortable, especially in the desert. So we moved back in 2018.
Okay.
And we moved back, and we had to
start a roasting company, apparently.
So we moved back, and we immediately we stopped the real estate. We stopped the e-commerce. Obviously, we just bought a vacation property. Nothing that you can really do about that. I sold my ownership in Lag. I'm like, I just can't do this. And so I sold that ownership out of there, and I went all the way back down to where we just had Flight Media, our marketing agency, and then we just had our real estate.
Yeah.
And so coming out of that, though, like it put us, like we got so broke. Like we were burned out, no money, stressed out of our minds, and things had to change.
Yeah, I feel like that is a perfect segue into probably the story. If you've been around the e-commerce alley for more than 4 months, probably you've heard the $1.06 story, Josh's $1.06 story. Especially if you've been around for 2 years, the whole 100 episodes, you've probably heard it. But for those that haven't heard it, Josh, if you want to just break down the $1.06 story, because I feel like that's such a great segue into being broke.
So 2018, we come back.
Yeah.
Our banker had told us, get a line of credit, it'll help you out. We did that. We maxed out the line of credit. That whole year, we're maxing out credit cards, just trying to survive because I didn't want to make tough decisions.
Yeah.
I didn't want to let go of staff because it was uncomfortable to me. And I love them all.
Now, was that something you
people.
felt like you knew you had to do at the time?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Like, you have, if anyone is listening to this and you're like, I have a lot of staff, and if I have no profit in my business, but I have staff, that is probably what's eating all of your profit. Yeah. And it's nice to say, be a leader, delegate and elevate, or do what you do best and outsource the rest, all those one-liners. But the reality is, it can eat you alive. Yeah. And it's just stupidity.
Yeah.
Like, it's really, really dumb to do that and then stay so prideful about the number of headcount that you have, because people judge themselves by how many headcount they have.
Yeah.
I judge you know what? I used to brag about my headcount. I'd go to agency conferences, I'd go places, and the first thing every person would say is like, oh, how many people are on your team?
Yeah.
It was like a
It's almost flipped now.
Measuring competition.
Yeah.
And now I brag about how few
we've only got 5 people.
Yeah. We have 5 people. We do 2.5 times the
Yeah.
revenue that we did when I had 12 and 14.
Yeah.
And so, so coming out, we're broke. I'm on vacation with my family in the end of 2018. This is September. We're down in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. We're in this multi-million-dollar property. And while we're there, I'm just working the whole time. I'm on my computer every day. I'd wake up early and I'm like, I'm gonna try to work and get as much as I can done because I'm trying to make payroll. And before we go do fun stuff, and while everyone, and I couldn't do it. And while everyone else is out doing stuff and adventuring and beaching and having all this fun stuff, I'm just there working. And I remember I'm there and I'm snapping, I'm not a selfie guy, but I'm snapping stories.
Yeah.
I'm snapping stories of this beautiful place. And I'm just like highlight reel showboating this beautiful place that we're in. And the irony in it is, although we're in a multi-million-dollar property that our whole family collectively rented on Airbnb, I'm sitting there and I'm at my computer and we have to make payroll like 2 days later, and it's a $10,000 payroll.
Yeah.
And we have $1.06 between our business checking and our savings account.
That's not going to make that payroll.
And it's not going to cover 10 G's.
Yeah.
And I maxed out my line of credit, and we had credit cards out. And so like, we're just stuck. And thank God we had some payments come through in the next day or two. And then we had to like drain our entire personal savings and all of our own bank accounts just to make that payroll.
Yeah.
And in doing that, it was the most painful experience ever. Like, it was so brutally painful to have to do that. And I'm sitting at this table and I'm on this vacation. I'm like, something has to change. And so what had to change was, like, I had to become a better leader and I had to reinvent our company. How are we going to operate? Why is it that we're here? What got me here? I had to reverse engineer that. And as I did it, I looked around and I realized we had 2 full-time staff who were just marketing. All they did was our own marketing. And we're only doing $500,000 a year or whatever it was. And you do the math on that.
Oh, they were doing your own marketing.
Yeah, 2 full-time people that we did blogging. We posted multiple times on all different social media networks to manage our own Facebook ads. We did our email. So we had people, only 2 full-time salaried staff doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do we need to be doing all that? And as we looked into it, we found out that like most of all our revenue came from ads and email. That was it. Ads and email.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. And so now that's all we teach because well, I'm like, get out of where you're at. Like, that's all you have to do. And so we stopped social media. We stopped blogging. We stopped a lot of different things. We were so spread, and we were paying so much in salaries and marketing. And I had to trim fat. Unfortunately, we had to let people go. And then we went all in on this marketing that then allowed us to become really, really lean. And we were just running our numbers. Yeah. And we already, this year in 2023, spent 50% of last year's gross revenue in ad spend this year with 5 people.
That's crazy.
And we were 5 people last year, but revenue is substantially higher. So you just look at the trajectory and the leverage you have with that, you can stay lean and profitable to get out of that hole, which is what we did.
Yeah, it is actually so funny that you mention that it has flipped in how you used to be like, look, I have 13 people, and now it's like, we only have 5 people.
Yeah, I'm trying to fight the status quo of like you have to have a massive team. I want to say, how do I have the best team? Yeah. And how do we take team retreats to Switzerland? And how do we do amazing things for our clients? And how do we have the unbeatable benefits? And how do we get to $1 million ahead? Yeah. Normally in business, $100,000 to $150,000 ahead is pretty normal. In the oil industry, $400,000 ahead is normal because they're really high profit margin. Yeah. And so I want to say, how do we get to $1 million? How do we do what is not normal, and how do we challenge ourselves to make that happen? Yeah. And there's a reality, and we may not be able to do that, but that's the mindset.
That might be impossible.
If I shoot for $1 million, I fall short at like $500K ahead or $600K ahead or $700K.
If we're meeting the oil industry, we're doing pretty good.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, and the dumb thing was, in all of that crap that we brought ourselves into, and this is 2018, so we're like 5 years into our business, and the dumb thing was, I read all the books. Mm-hmm. I know all the quotes. I listened to Tony Robbins and Les Brown and Jim Rohn, and I knew all of that stuff. Like, I was all into personal development. I read 20 to 30 books a year, all on personal development, all on mindset, all on nonfiction, things that I'm trying to grow myself. Yeah. And I knew all the things I had to do, but it was all head knowledge. And a lot of people have a boatload of head knowledge. They're just drunk on knowledge. That's all. And they just go consume and consume and consume and consume, and they never actually change their behavior to match the knowledge that they have. And because of that, you get into these holes and these bad problems, and you're like, well, what happened? Why am I broke? Why do I have $1.06 in my bank account? It's like, because you were an idiot this entire way. Why do you have I can never remember. It was like 10 or 12 people at the time, and you're doing $500,000. Why would you have 500,000 divided by 10 is $50,000 a head?
Yeah.
Not including your overhead and your ad spend and your expenses, and not including that.
Yeah.
No one made.
So I guess that invalidates,
no one made any good money.
Yeah, I guess that invalidates my question on if you knew you had to get rid of those people, because the number says it's pretty obvious.
Most people that have people know know when they are overstaffed. They just don't want to admit it, or they want to hold on to the very, 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 very last minute. And the problem is, I did that. That is the last time I'm waiting that long. I knew I should have let people go 3 months earlier, and I decided to rack up $25,000, $30,000 in additional debt over 3 months just because I didn't want to make a tough decision.
Yeah.
And that put our entire team and company in jeopardy because of my own negligence to make the decision I know had to be made.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a lot of people that are in this position, and it's easier to just not do it and wait till the very end and then wonder, why am I in a bad position? And it's because you didn't make the tough decision like a leader should.
Yeah. So obviously 2020 changed business for everybody. Some good, some bad. How did Flight Media change through 2020, both through like COVID and on?
Yeah. Some people won in 2020 for sure.
Yeah.
Like some of you listen to like your ecom and like then the government's handing out money like it's free candy because it was free, and then people are just trying to buy everything because they see ads and they're all stuck inside.
Yeah.
Those people won. A lot of service businesses got just punched in the throat.
Yeah.
The payroll protection plan, the PPP, and the EIDL, that all helped for sure. Like you got basically free money. The government's just handing out money like crazy, which by the way,
inflation rate shows.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I'm super nerdy. So as soon as every stimmy check that my wife and I got, I took and I threw in a Roth IRA into a stock portfolio. And I've already, not only did I didn't just spend it, all that money has almost doubled, which is, I'm just super nerdy like that. So I'm like, the inflation is going to hit me. I'm going to pay it forward into my future self.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's money hitting up, but the reality is everyone got hit. So I remember this moment we had right over here, right outside the studio, we have a conference room. And one by one, I brought each person, and it was the most painful. And this is like, there's ripping the Band-Aid off, and then there's just like dragging someone behind your car with a chain. Like it's just like slow, right? And it was, it's like ripping it and then slowly pulling the Band-Aid off. It's more painful. And
I liked the chain.
The chain.
It's just like, that's a terrible, that would be awful.
Well, an example of that would be like, I've had people say like, well, should I just let them go or like tell them that they're gone in 2 weeks? No, that's like like to fire someone and say you have 2 weeks and then you're out is like dragging someone with a chain. What are they going to do in 2 weeks? So anyway, what I decided to do was I'm going to cut everybody's salaries by like 25%. I'm like, it's either we got to let people go or we have to hit everybody. And I decided to hit everyone with it. Thinking that everyone would be on board and support it. And for the most part, it was like that. But one by one, I had to bring everyone in. I'm like, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we're doing. Your salary is going down. We still expect the same amount of work, maybe a little less. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. And I just had to keep doing that one by one to everybody.
Yeah. And how many people was that at the time?
We were between, I think we were around 10. I think it was 10. When we did this, we let go of those 2 people.
Yeah.
And then we stayed at 10 people for a long time. And then 2020 is where like we had the final, the 10, and we had to like cut, and I said it's temporary. And it was temporary. It ended up being temporary. But I said just for the next month or 2, we have to figure some stuff out. We had clients dropping off left and right that we worked with for whatever reason. And this is before stimulus money all came out too, to be fair. So by the end of 2020, things turned around for a lot of businesses, but stimmy money hadn't really all been handed out a whole lot. And so we had clients who were really nervous, so they started pulling their retainers. We had to cancel contracts. We dropped like 20 grand, 30 grand a month, like real fast, and that hurt us. And so we had to cut everyone's salaries. That was just brutally painful that year. Some people ended up deciding to leave, which I was like, hey, I totally respect you. You got to take care of your family, and I want you to. And then everyone else, we kind of clung on to the last 7 or so people, 6 or 7 people that ended up making it through that. That was tough. So that was going into 2020, and then at the end of 2020, I go on this trip. Kelsey and I take once a year. We spend 2 weeks, like kind of in the not quite in the wilderness, but like we have a hard shell rooftop tent on our Ford Explorer, and we'll take that and we'll just like we'll go spend 2.
Not sponsored by Ford.
Not sponsored
unless
by
they want
Ford.
to. But
So we go out and we're in like Glacier National Park, Wyoming, South Dakota. So we're out in that whole region. And I remember we're at Glacier National Park. And I'm out there and I'm like, I'm 8 years in, or 7 to 8 years in. I'm in that marker there. And I'm like, something has to change. We got to do something different. I have for 8 years done the same thing day in and day out.
Yeah.
And we haven't experienced this breakthrough that we needed, and something had to change. So I break out my computer and I'm sitting there. I even snapped a photo of this to remember this moment. And I titled the photo Where the Journey Began. And I literally titled it and I threw it on my computer. I still have it to this day. And it's me sitting at a picnic table with a cart pulled over, and I'm in my laptop, and Kelsey's hanging on a hammock in the background between these trees in Glacier National Park, and I'm in coffee, and I'm writing all this vision for what has started to become. And there's this vision to be a leading world-class training ground for business owners, particularly in e-commerce, to learn through courses and live events and coaching and in-person intensives, and to be able to help people have these breakthroughs and teach the lessons in marketing, because we're good marketers, but I just was not a great manager of money. I was not a great leader like I needed to really be. And so if I drafted all of this plan, I knew it'd be a lot. I didn't know we'd have a podcast. I didn't know the Ecommerce Alley would become our new branding. I didn't know we would have the Max Profits Mentorship. I didn't know I didn't know what it looked like. I just knew this is the what. Now we need to figure out the how. And we come back from that trip. I share it with Maya, our business partner at the time. I share it with Kelsey. Well, Kelsey was with me, so she got to hear it for many hours in advance. And so it felt like I knew we were going to be starting over. And I brought Maya on board. I brought Kelsey on board, and that's all I needed because we were all the owners. And it felt like starting over. We had like no list, we had no name, we had no courses, we had no lead magnets,
literally starting over.
Because we had stopped all of our content. We had stopped all of that stuff years before, or a year or so before. And so it kind of just, everything flatlined. And I'm like, we didn't speak specifically to e-commerce all the time. Like we work in the e-com world now, the Ecommerce Alley, right? But like we would talk about advertising in general. We wouldn't specify for the people we really wanted to work with. And so it felt like starting over. And there's a great quote by Alex Hormozi that I felt this way back then, and but he said it. In the last year I heard this, and it was better than anything I could have said, but this is how I felt. And that was that if you make your free stuff better than their paid stuff, and you'll have as many customers as you can handle. And so I have always been obsessed with Disney, with this great experiences, and I love it. And so I wanted to build a set. I wanted to build a studio. I wanted to go all out, but we also didn't have a whole lot of money. And so I had to...
So the first step in this new path was the podcast for you then?
I believe the podcast was the first thing we had to build.
Okay.
I was like, we need to get the podcast in the studio, and that will pave the way for filming content and building courses and doing live streams and doing all of that stuff. And so that's why where we're sitting right now, if you're watching this video, we're in the Ecommerce Alley studio right here, which is actually about to get a lot bigger here in the next year or so. And so we built this set. And I I got Kelsey and Maya to approve a little bit of a budget. We didn't have a whole lot, so I had to borrow like all of our tech gear. We had to borrow. Like, my brother's a photographer, so he gave us thousands of dollars in gear because we didn't have a lot of money.
We didn't have any of our own stuff.
I think the main thing we had was at least we went to Home Depot and we spent like maybe $1,200, $1,500 on all the materials. Before all the costs went like super crazy. So we built this set, but like I was so intentional about this has to be world class. So you don't become world class by doing what everybody else is doing. You have to do something different. And if you are watching right now and you look at this set, you're gonna see, I'm gonna tell you some things that nobody knows except those that were here. Or if I tell a story, if you come tour. And so this brick wall right here, it didn't look like this at all. We actually had to darken bricks on it.
It looked cheap.
Yeah, it looked real cheap. We bought it from Home Depot, and each pan was like $20. And then we took this plaster and we put it in between to make it look like it was actually real brick in there. And then we used Sharpies to underline different bricks to give it a degree of depth. So it gives us like this perception to it. And then we, this sheet metal over here.
We put actual mortar on the bricks too.
Yeah, we put actual mortar on the bricks. Then we put this ivy going down the bricks. And then with this steel wall over here, the sheet metal over here, it was so clean. It looked so perfect. I'm like, I don't want clean. Like if we're in a back alley, it's not clean, it's dirty. And the reason we did an alley, by the way, some people may not know this. And the reason we call this the e-commerce alley is, first of all, I love the grunge. I love the rusticness of it. I love that design style. But also, the alley is where, and this used to want to be my tagline, but Dylan didn't let me say this.
We don't use it anymore.
We don't use this, But the back alley is where you learn things you wouldn't learn anywhere else, or you get things you wouldn't get anywhere else.
I mean, it's a little edgy. It's a little edgy, but I like it.
Yeah, that's the concept. Like we want to have world-class training that you can't find anywhere else in the style that we teach, in the way that we teach, and in the quality of the production. Like I'm confident in saying we will lead the way in this industry with the level of production and experience people have when they go through our boot camps, when they go through our live events, when they watch our videos, when they're listening or watching this right now. There's a lot of thought and time and process behind every element of this. Those are 800 Kelvin right there. Those are really warm lights. Those are not daylight. They are not 2700 Kelvin, which by the way is a color of light. They're 800s. And the reason they're 800s is because I wanted it. I'm a nerd. I wanted them to be very warm. And they're only 1,000 lumens because I don't want them to be very dark. So there's a lot of meaning and intentionality behind this that I just believe to be world class, the requirements to be world class are substantially higher than others. I remember, when we talked, we're going through Dylan didn't work for us at the time. He comes in and I kind of like contract him just to help build it because I knew he was a video guy. And so we're going through what kind of gear do we need? And I'm like, well, I want to live cut this so we don't have a lot of editing later. So we built out the whole Blackmagic camera setup. We built out the A10. We built out all that so we don't have to have post-production. We come in, we film it, and it is edited in live time. We're cutting, and we leave, intro, outro, done. I don't want big, bulky headphones. I want it to be an experience. So I do have a little earpiece if I'm interviewing a guest because I don't want it to be, and I have it in one ear. I don't want it to be prominent. I don't want a big Shure SM7B microphone in my face because everybody does that. I have a shotgun mic that's right up here so that way it feels like we're in the room together.
It gives a cinematic.
Exactly. And that's a good word, cinematic. The lighting that we have is the angle Dylan has and the darkness of it is because we want this to be cinematic. All of the wood back here we have coffee bean bags. We have old antique crates that we bought from an antique store back here. We have R2-D2 because it leans into our passion.
That's just to be
That's
fun.
just fun.
That has no relation to anything.
That has no relation to any of this.
It just kind of showed up and it's just here now.
But we took what we had, we worked with it, we got an intern to come in and build all this stuff out, and I believe that was one of the most monumental and best decisions we ever made in our business, was building this studio. And people thought we were overboard. Like, you're just starting. See if you're going to get traction. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like, this is the whole, there's a whole story Tony Robbins will talk about, like, burn the boats. If you want to arrive, right, and you want to conquer the island, burn the boats. There's no turning back, right? And I'm like, all chips in. We're burning the freaking boats, and we're going all in on this. And that first month, we had 90 downloads on the podcast. And a lot of freaking time in it. All the planning, the filming, the editing. We still didn't know what we were doing.
It took us like 3 days at a time to do the podcast back then.
It
was like a full day of writing, a full day of filming, and a full day of editing. Because it was cut, but that didn't mean it was ready to ship.
And now we just come in and wing it, and we're good.
Essentially,
So we come in and we build this, and I knew that this would become something special, and this studio would become something special, and it really has. It's grown like crazy.
It's crazy, like, looking back at you making the decision to build the studio. I couldn't imagine what we couldn't have been able to do, what we wouldn't have been able to do without the studio. To provide the high quality boot camp that we do, and the live streams this isn't a plug, but if you want to go join the Facebook group, you can. The live streams every Thursday in the Facebook group. It's stuff that everybody does live streams in their Facebook group, but none of them look like this. And it's just the quality that we were able to get going right out of the gates. Because if we didn't have the set, we would have done our boot camp, we would have done our live streams with a webcam at your desk.
Screen
and
sharing
it would have been fine.
Yeah.
But the quality that we're able to offer here, that you foresaw and that you put the time and effort into building the set, I think springboarded us into creating the best content right off the bat. Now we've got 3,000 people that have gone through the boot camp and 5,000 people in our Facebook group. And I guess my next question would be, you look at those numbers, now over 200 coaching clients, all of that kind of stuff. What in the last 2 years or so has been like the most impactful for you?
I don't know. I'll come back. But what I want to also say is what's so funny. I love when we do our boot camps and people think that it's pre-recorded.
Oh, yeah.
Because the production is so high.
We have
every time we do a live event, we do it once every 4 months.
This is pre-recorded.
Yeah.
There's no way
this is live. This is no way. And I'm like, and then we'll go to an intermission and then we'll come back and be like, hey, yes, good to see you, John B. on November 12th, 2023. We're so excited that you're here.
Yeah.
So we'd like to have fun like that, but it does speak to that. And I always love when those moments happen.
Yeah.
I think seeing the lives changed has been the best. I got a text last night. One of our clients, he messaged me, says, Josh, sends me a screenshot of his Facebook or a Shopify dashboard, and he just broke $80,000 a month.
Wow.
And he was doing $5,000 4 months ago when I met him.
Yeah.
This literally within the same hour, I had another client messaged me. He did $15K, and when I met him, he was doing substantially less. But he said, more importantly, I did almost it was like $6,700 in net profit this month to date so far. And I've never done that in the entire last year since before I met you. So it's really cool to have these relationships and to see just the light bulb go bing, like going off. And then we get to feed into that. We get to like have life-giving words. And the other thing I love is when I receive messages, and I get these every week, and it's heartbreaking, but I receive messages. I actually had 2 clients this week. One had messaged me and said, she said, I'm about to break. We used to be at 5,000 subscriptions.
Yeah.
We're down to 700. I'm about to have to let go of 3 people that work for me. One is I think my mom that also works for me, and it's just like, I hear these stories and I'm able to speak life into that and encourage them and help them get through and help them unlock this. And so like being able to do that, there's so much fulfillment every day. I wake up 4:45 a.m. I'm out of bed.
Yep.
I don't wake up begrudgingly and say, oh, thank God it's Friday. No, it's thank God it's freaking every day of my life.
Yeah.
And I get to wake up and I get to do what I feel called to do in my life. And I get to do it with so much purpose and passion that you can't help but like be jacked up when you're around me too. That's what I want. I want to be so contagious. Anyone I'm in the room with, I'm talking to, suddenly feels I can do this. And I think those are the best moments, especially when we get to coach a lot of clients. And that's a ton of fun.
Yeah. So if that's like your highlight, I mean, even with all the growth and everything that we've had in the last 2 years, has there been anything that even in the growth that has been hard or?
Yeah, I mean, when you transition, you have to reinvent yourself into a brand new company with no name, like we're starting fresh. Yeah. No one knew who our podcast was. I couldn't get anyone on our podcast. People are like, oh, I'm not getting on your podcast. It has like 3 episodes. Like
they don't respond.
They just don't respond.
Act like they don't don't act like they
don't even respond.
Yeah, they're just like.
And one day, we're going to have Alex Hormozy sitting here. Yeah. One day, I'll have Ezra Firestone or Molly Pittman or some of these people that I really admire sitting in this room. Maybe Joe Rogan. No, he won't come here. I'll go on his, hopefully. So one day, I'd love to have those people, and it's just this journey. So, like, the hardest part has just been mental fortitude. You know, to have the mental fortitude to go through this when, like, month 1, we just spent 6 months building a podcast studio, ordering everything, planning how this all works, learning how podcasting and videos even work, releasing the first episode. And in the first 4 episodes, we got 95 downloads in a whole month or 90 downloads in that first month. And it's like, that's hard. Yeah. Mentally, the fortitude to push through. When you're 6 months in and you have like 1,000 cumulative or 900 accumulative downloads, it's like, oh, you know, like when is this good? The amount of effort that goes in. That was painful. And the most painful was the transition of our business partner, Maya, which was July of last year. So Maya, wonderful human being, been part of our family here she was here for 9 years. And then she actually transitioned she came and it was very sad. It was very emotional. I cried. Like it was really tough because she's like, I have my other kid on the way and I'm ready to kind of step into a different side of my life right now. And so that was a painful, sad experience. Yeah. But And she also left the month before we had the greatest traction ever in the company.
Yeah,
and you were there at that time,
our next boot camp.
Yeah, so we announced Maya's leaving. She was there for one more month, and then all of a sudden, right after she was gone, like that next month was when we had done our boot camp, and that's when things just started. Like that's when we start to feel like we got this.
Yeah,
this is it. We know what we're here to do, and that's when the momentum started just swinging up. And I wish she could have been here because she grinded so many years, day in and day out with me through the grueling pain, and she had to transition out of the business, and then we started to experience that. Well, she sees it vicariously through social media and stuff, and we still love her, but that was probably the most painful in these 2 years as we've gone through that. But I'm a glass half full guy. To me, everything.
You are.
Every time we run a Black Friday, Cyber Monday promo, and it just bombs.
Sometimes
I'm like, great. I just learned one less thing to do. So it's hard for me to look at things in any negative light.
Sometimes it's hard to be around you because you're so optimistic, and I get nervous about being optimistic, but you're like, it'll be fine. I'm like, actually, you're right. I think it will be fine.
Yeah.
But you're just so optimistic about everything.
Yeah. And we're running it just reminds me, we ran a promo sprint. We were trying to spend $50,000 in 2 weeks on our last boot camp. And we're like $30,000 in our Facebook pixel, we were idiots and we touched it and it broke. And we spent $8,000 in 2 days. We were spending like four grand a day at that time. We spent $8,000 and we had like a couple $27 tickets sold for that boot camp. It was bad. But in that, I'm like, we just learned how important.
That's not how I was feeling. I was like,
I'm like, we lost $8,000. We just learned how important Conversion API is, and we had to build our own server, and now we know how to build our own server with Google Tag Manager and all this stuff that we never knew before. And now that we look back, our cost per acquisition has plummeted because it's gotten so good. It's gotten so great because we fixed something that was not very good.
Yeah.
Then we broke it, probably the worst time to break it. We're spending heavily.
Yes.
But you can always look at it. So I always look at things from a positive light. And I just look at the trajectory. Like over 3,000 have gone through it. We're improving that. We have 5,000 in our group. That first year we had 14,000-ish downloads, 83,000 in year 2. I'm hoping if we got 1 million, that'd be freaking awesome. If we get 500,000, I'll be grateful.
Yeah.
The coaching clients, and I would just say, like, it's been a 10-year overnight success. 8 years to find ourselves, and 2 years to live into that.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't want to ever come across like braggadocious in anything, but we had sometimes you have to go through all that crap. Where like we had years where we had 50,000 in profit for the year.
Yeah.
And we were just a pass-through LLC. So for anybody that's super nerdy about it, it's basically that's the owner's income. So we made like 50,000 in profit. By the time you factor in like taxes and stuff, we were negative. And now we're an S corp, so we get salaried, and then we have the company is separate.
Yeah.
And so now we have months where we do 50,000 in profit in a month after we're paid.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to brag. I say this because I want to encourage anybody that's listening and just feels like beat down and feels like I'm in the $1.06 moment. Like you're not finished unless you say you're finished. And I had every reason to throw in the towel at $1.06. I could go get a marketing gig. I had someone try to buy out our company and take me on as their marketing director, and I said no. And you're not finished till you give up.
Yep.
And even in those moments, you could push through to that. And in doing so, luckily our vacation property stayed.
Yeah.
We bought the second a few months ago, or 6 months ago. We bought the third, and now those have cash flowed ready for the fourth, although we're not mentally ready because it's like so much freaking work to go negotiate and find and stage and all that crap. But we're very blessed. We're fortunate to be here, but it wasn't like we're suddenly here. Like a lot of people see the finished product, and I'm like, no, this is like a decade into eating crap, and making so many freaking mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a great spot to, I guess, I'd be curious to know, what do you see as the future for the Ecommerce Alley in the next, not maybe 5-10 years down the road, but even in the next 1 to 2 years, what do you see happening?
Well, I see a lot of things in the 10 year.
Yeah.
Definitely in the 2 year, our team is going to easily double. Like, it's coming. We were talking right before this about how the next 2 people we're looking to hire.
Yeah.
So like we're to this point now where all of that stuff that I've learned about hiring, like I'm really gun shy on hiring. I do not want to hire because I feel that pain in the back of my mind, just like flipping out. Like, okay, we've been this before. Be very, very cautious. Even though we're in this spot, we could hire several people. We would be fine.
Yeah.
And so our team is probably going to double. We're also going to be diving on, like we have now figured out our voice. We're still figuring it out, but we're in a 100th episode. I have a lot of reps in now.
Yeah.
I understand the voice, the tone, our audience. And so now that we have gotten good at that, now it's time to add the volume.
Yeah.
And so next year, and some of you may, another business we have, I know we shouldn't be super spread. I only have 3 right now.
Yeah.
Vacations, the Ecommerce Alley, and the third one's our co-working space, Coffee Space, which is a coffee-themed co-working space. And so we're right now in the high-rise building, and then we have the port building. And so the high-rise is about 4,000 square feet, where we're at right now. But in the other building, the second floor we've gutted, and we're going to convert that into, we're excited.
New studio, new offices,
Dylan drew up
new
the plans
conference
for
room.
it, and we had an
I'm
architect
very
working on
excited.
it. Yeah, so it's going to be like the ultimate e-commerce alley.
Yeah.
The way we design it, when you walk through the hall, it's going to be like you're literally walking through an alley with ivy on the walls and like the dim lit street lights. Like, how we're going to build it is an experience, and when people come here and visit, they'll be able to watch in and attend. And so the studio, the set that we have, we're going to have, I think, 3 sets, right? We're going to have 1, 2, and then we have like a green screen for whatever else we need.
Control room.
Separate
Because right now
room.
I'm still just in this room, but
still in the same room with me.
Room,
yeah. So that's going to be exciting. Continue to create world-class content.
Yeah.
We're looking for vacation. We might actually be a vacation property number 2 in the next 2 years, maybe 6 if we're real aggressive. But things are coming together. And I think ultimately it's just consistently renewing my vision for what this is, reflecting on where we've come, remaining grateful in those moments, and then also just reinventing myself as we go to be the best possible Josh Coffee that I could ever be for anyone around me.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
There it is.
2 years.
That's
And
just
forever.
2 years.
That's
that one's
just 2
forever,
years.
but I know you've got big plans. We don't have time to go over your big plans for 5-10 years.
Yeah.
But I think that's it. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't let you close out the 100th episode of the podcast. So
you intro it. We let you intro.
Yep. So
that's not fair.
There's your camera. Go for it.
Well,
So dramatic.
You have been listening to the Ecommerce Alley or watching the Ecommerce Alley podcast, produced by Dylan Counts, who is no longer behind the scenes, but he finally made another debut in front of the scenes for right now.
Still have to go edit this thing though. So.
We'll see how it sticks. If you are enjoying this, if you are one of our favorite human beings that listens on a regular basis, we want to say thank you. We are grateful for you. 100 episodes. It feels like a million years, not gonna lie, and thousands of hours of work. But if you could, go ahead, take 10 seconds with your thumb, go rate the podcast if you're on an audio. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, hit the thumbs up button. We appreciate you. We're grateful for you. The next 100 episodes are going to be way better, and we're going to be a lot more handsome, I promise. Don't worry. Changes are coming.
There you go.
We appreciate you. See ya.